And thank you for joining us. For those who don't know me, my name is Erin. I'm the marketing coordinator at RMON Networks. My job is to communicate with our customers about the RMON Networks team and the latest industry news and technology. So I hope you're all excited to hear about ShareFile today because we do think it's the latest and greatest. Also, Andrew Smith is here joining us from Buffalo, New York. He's a senior solutions engineer from Citrix, and we're extremely lucky to have him live to review ShareFile in depth with us today. Okay. Oops. So who is RMON Networks? For all the newbies on the line, Tim Howard is our president and CEO and started RMON Networks in 2002. His mission was to help small to mid-sized businesses manage their information technology, and that is still our mission today. RMON Networks has grown to just about 20 employees, and we employ many subcontractors and vendors that are working behind the scenes to help us help you. We are committed to educating our customers with the latest technology in the industry, which is why we're here today talking about the Citrix ShareFile solution. So why Citrix ShareFile? There's so many solutions available today. We have at least 20 to 30 vendors calling us every single day, trying to get their solution in front of us so we can implement it at customer sites. So we spend a lot of time trialing, testing, and vetting solutions for our customers. We truly feel that ShareFile is a viable product for many organizations we support. We also have it implemented in-house here at RMON Networks, and I hear our owner, Tim, saying all the time, if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for our customers. So take a look at the key challenges up on the screen here. The number one challenge to overcome is something called shadow IT. Shadow IT is a very common issue. Shadow IT is the use of personal cloud applications by your employees without your permission. Examples of this are Dropbox or OneDrive. They're using these tools because they're useful and they're helping them get their job done. So that's not a bad thing. It's only bad because the use of these applications is creating security vulnerabilities for your organization. So if you read our newsletter or follow our blog, you may have already heard these statistics, but 86% of cloud applications in use are not sanctioned by the IT department or the company. And another survey revealed that IT or business executives believe there were maybe 10 to 15 unknown personal cloud applications being used by employees, but in fact there were almost 70. So as stated, these personal applications create large vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities you see up on the screen as well, like loss of control over your data, compliance violations, and quite simply just puts your data at risk. All because employees just want to get their jobs done. So enter ShareFile. ShareFile is going to give your employees the mobility that they want and the ease to get their job done, but it's also going to give you the security you need. And plus, as an added bonus, it's super easy. It has a very familiar feel. You can see in that image up on the screen there, it looks exactly like another shared network drive. And it also integrates seamlessly with Office 365. So we've implemented quite a few customers with ShareFile already, and I have a few testimonials from them. Up on the screen you'll see from the RAIN group. We interviewed the RAIN group right after they migrated to ShareFile, and Erica and their CFO said they were up worried all weekend long that when they came into work on Monday post-migration it was going to be a nightmare. They were picturing scenarios, terrible scenarios, and they said to their surprise she heard absolutely nothing and that everyone liked it right from the beginning, and even the non-techie employees found it easy to use. So that's a beautiful thing right there, just ease of transition. Also, we just recently migrated Community Support Network. They were having various challenges. One was they needed a central repository for all their files. They were saving their files everywhere in personal cloud applications on their desktops, and they found that there could be 15 versions of the same document out existing, and they also needed to make sure they had their HIPAA requirements covered. So as well, they said that it was super easy, super simple, and we also were able to secure them nonprofit pricing. So if you're looking to move your business to the cloud, ShareFile is just a great solution. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Andrew Smith. So welcome, Andrew, and please, if you have any questions for him, just type them in the box. We encourage lots of questions. He's the expert, so let's take advantage of his time.
Thank you very much, Erin. And so we are going to cover a little of the stuff that Erin just talked about, and it's really that people are working so many different ways. Okay, working at home, working on the go, and like Erin said, whether with or without IT approval. All right, and in a lot of cases, it's not malicious. They're not trying to cause problems. But because of some of the choices they make, it's not necessarily the best choice. All right, so very much, people want easy access. They want to be able to work on different devices. We've always found ways to work around this, as much as IT is trying to stop us because of their concerns around security and compliance, data leakage. And now that we've got these around compliance, you've got debilitating fines in a lot of cases where, if you let that data out in the wild, you may not be in business anymore. So when we talk about, what are the things that people really need? The big three that typically get the focus really are productivity, collaboration, security. All right, those are the big things we talk about, and we are going to cover them. And Erin gave some of that in the introduction. But some of the other things I really want to talk about that are some additional strength around ShareFile is how do we help people make that transition where they've got maybe some legacy solutions in place. They're trying to get things to work with other applications or solutions. What can we do along those lines? So look at it from the productivity standpoint. We're really talking about what users need, okay, what people need to do their job. And flat out, they need to be able to have a good place to store the documents, the data they need to work with. They need to be able to share it easily with people both internally and externally. And from a convenience standpoint, they want to be able to just sync things. So they don't want to have to go out to get something from somewhere. They want it to be available as easy as it was local. They don't want to be tied to a specific device. All right. I work across, the average user has 3 devices these days. I'm above average, and so I work from a few more than that, and it's critical to me that as I move between devices, I have access to the same information regardless of the device that I'm working from. And in a lot of cases, that data may not necessarily be in a central repository. We've got stuff in all different places, and there's reasons why it's there. We might have legacy data out on network shares. We may have some collaborative stuff on SharePoint. And if we're using Office 365, we might be using OneDrive for Business. Okay, so how do we ease access to it and try to resolve where did I put that? How do we get around those problems? All right, and really the last key piece, and this is really to answer that shadow IT concern, is really we want to enable these kind of features for users, but we really need to be able to monitor and manage. So what do we think of as key features for enterprise file sync and share? And really it comes down to compliance and protecting intellectual property. So maintaining the security around that data. And that's going to include things like being able to block access. So I might be able to share a file with you, and then maybe our relationship changes. Maybe your project's over, and I can be able to now block access to that file. All right, have the control over, if I share that file, whether it's internally or externally, then I can limit what you can do. So you might only be able to view it, you might not be able to print it because you're my customer, but my co-workers might be able to make changes to that file. All right, and we need to know where that data ends up, even when it's being downloaded to somebody's system. We need to know where that data has ended up. We've got to provide IT with control over the data, including where it's stored. One of the biggest challenges around a lot of these data services is where does the data end up, okay? If you're using, your favorite online file storage, do you know where that vendor actually keeps that data? I mean, we kind of assume that it's in the United States, but do we know for sure? All right. And again, we need that sync across devices because we're using multiple devices. And it has to work with large files. All right. I do a lot of presentations. A lot of people ask me for my presentations, and they end up being huge files, honestly, because of the way Microsoft does some things. But how do we make that easily available? How do we solve the problem of distributing a large file to our entire workforce without using up all the storage on the email server, right? So we're going to focus a little bit more now on how we can deal with a lot of the legacy infrastructure that people already have. And the way we do that is what we call connectors. All right, so ShareFile Storage Zone connectors allow us to bring access to other resources in through ShareFile. So what does that mean? So as a ShareFile administrator, I can go in and I can choose what connectors are available to users, including things like external services. So if I've got users out there who I know are using Dropbox or Google Drive, and I want to migrate all that data ultimately to ShareFile so we have control over it, I can provide them with connectors so that they can bring that data in. Now, for some things like OneDrive for Business, which is, again, going to be tied to us as an organization, maybe I'm going to make that two-way access. We can put stuff there. Same with SharePoint, if that's part of our Office 365. But a lot of those commercial products like Dropbox, even Google Drive, Box, etc., I may want to make that one way. So it can have users bring data into our shared environment, part of our ShareFile, and they have easy access to what work they've already done, and that's there. But once we bring it into ShareFile, we're going to keep it in ShareFile. And regardless of whatever device, so whether I'm going through the web interface, whether I'm going from an iPad, maybe an Android-based phone in this case, I have access to all of those documents from all of those connected resources. All right, so it's not that I only have access to what's on ShareFile from my phone. If I have a connector back to a network share, or I have a connector back to SharePoint, I have access to those documents via those connectors. Well, the new things we've added is actually an Exchange connector. So if right now you have a lot of things that exist as attachments to email, now you can actually have access to those via ShareFile through the Exchange connector. All right, so we don't have to worry about copying everything out. We can leave things where they are, and that's really one of the things that we really we want to talk about, is that we're not saying, hey, you've got to take everything, all the stuff you've ever created on all your systems anywhere and migrate it over to ShareFile. We want to provide access. Okay, we want to give you the opportunity to make the decisions about, well, what do I want where from a storage standpoint? Because a lot of times, we need access to that legacy data, projects from last year, files from 6 months ago. But do we necessarily need that on the same move to the same storage? Maybe we can keep it where it is and just provide access. And how do we provide that access? I've talked about mobile devices like iPads and phones, but from a Windows device, we can use the Drive Mapper. So there's a couple of ways we can work from a Windows device. We can use a ShareFile sync, so the documents that we choose to keep local copies of are going to be continually synced to my desktop. All right, so that might be my personal files, that may be certain clients or customers I'm working with, or projects I'm involved with, and I can add and remove those as I need to. If I'm no longer on that project or no longer working with that customer, there's no reason to sync those files anymore. The other way I can do access is through a Drive Mapper. So I connect to my ShareFile, it looks like a drive. Instead of having to go and have all of these different network drives that I have to connect to all the time, I can just connect to ShareFile, and all of my drives via connectors are available to me as well. All right, so we can make it very, very easy for users that they just map to ShareFile, and that's going to work whether I'm on my local network or not, because the connection is known how to get there, so it's not something that only works when I'm in the office. We've got people who work from Macs. It's always been a challenge because different file systems, different structures, how do we make that things easily available? So we have a desktop client for Mac as well, so we can provide very easy connections to all of those files from our normal Windows environments. All right, so we have access to those documents, we have access to those connected resources as well. So if you haven't caught the drift before, a lot of the messaging really is around the amount of flexibility that we really have with ShareFile. All right, so that's how we want to use it, what we're connecting to from a storage basis, and how the product actually works overall. So where does our storage live? So we look at it from a user standpoint, whether you're coming in through a browser and pick your favorite browser, whether you're using some of our connectors, which we'll talk a little bit more to things like Outlook, you're coming in from a Windows device or a Mac, from a connectivity standpoint. So how do you actually authenticate and get access to your stuff? That is handled through the ShareFile Cloud, okay, and that's kind of where everything runs. Now, no data is there, and in truth, no real credentials are there other than your account that you use to log into the ShareFile website. Okay, so if you want to access from the web, it's going to be those credentials. The important thing to know is, well, the data doesn't sit in the same place. Okay, so where does the data sit? Well, I actually get to pick. All right, and I can mix and match as needed. So I can put it in the Citrix ShareFile Cloud and store it there. If I'm healthcare or I'm government, there are specialized Citrix ShareFile Clouds designed to meet those requirements, okay, compliance requirements, all right? I can connect to on-premise storage, so that could be a connector to a network share or to SharePoint on-premises. I could put storage out on Amazon or Windows Azure, or connect to my OneDrive for Business and SharePoint that I have as part of Office 365. All right, so I've got a lot of choices about where I put that data, and again, I can mix and match as needed, so certain kinds of data could be in one location, other kinds of data could be somewhere else, so I can balance for, you know, what's going to be most economical. What do I have to worry about from a compliance standpoint? So typically, cloud storage is going to be the easiest, most cost-effective way to do that. And so that could be the ShareFile Cloud itself, which is going to be Citrix managed. And so they worry about availability, they worry about security. Okay, so basically you just say, I need this much space, and they say, okay, and you're welcome to use it. So it's going to be very similar to something like a Box or a Dropbox business for business version, all right? Or you could use cloud storage that's not directly managed by Citrix. So you can set up your own store on your own Microsoft Azure account, or if you've got an Amazon S3 account, you could put your storage there. Well, why would I want to put it in the cloud but not have it Citrix managed? The big piece is, honestly, is the encryption keys. All right, so everything is encrypted wherever it's stored, okay, and it's encrypted when it's being accessed too. So, you know, in flight, it's encrypted, okay. But if I have it on the ShareFile Cloud, then ultimately, Citrix ShareFile owns those encryption keys, all right, because they have to be able to make that data available to me. And that might be a concern for me. If I set up my own storage on Amazon or Azure, I'm now in control of those encryption keys. So even though, let's say, some nameless government agency says, hey, I want their data, they go to Microsoft, and Microsoft says, you know, well, we don't like to do this, but you've got the right paperwork, so here's their data. Well, what can they do with it? Well, in this case, they can't do anything because they don't have the encryption keys. So they would still have to try to get the encryption keys from you before they'd actually have access to that data. All right. And again, that's sometimes a business policy thing, or that could tie back to actual compliance. We can also use on-premises storage. Okay, so that, again, that could be existing storage that we have, or we can set up new storage that honestly looks like cloud storage to ShareFile, but it's on-premises. So we have physical control over where that data is stored. And again, that may be compliance or security. So we might have an internal policy that says this kind of information never leaves our four walls. Well, how do we make it accessible? By using ShareFile, we can securely make it accessible, all right, but the data still only resides on premises. All right, so if we're concerned about that from a security standpoint, we also may have policies in place that says, well, you can view it remotely, but you can't actually get a copy of it, or you can't print it. And then, as I've talked about, we also have what we call restricted storage zones. Okay, so we can actually add another tier of security onto that on-premises storage that says, well, this is for internal users only. Even if you've got valid credentials to other ShareFile data, you can only get to this data if you have the Active Directory Windows login necessary to get to it. And then I've talked about the connectors already, and those how we connect to existing systems. All right, so you can see that there's a lot of ways that we can go and supplement and provide more access to what you're already doing, as well as give you opportunities to create new ways to store data. But the most valuable thing, and the reason why your users are using these solutions, like Aaron talked about in the introduction, is that we really have a need to share information externally, okay? But we still need to have that control. So when we look at how do we share data via ShareFile, we've really got a couple of different ways to do it. So if I'm working from the web, I can go and email directly from ShareFile. All right, or I can get a link to a file or a file and include my own email. All right, I'm sure you've had somebody send you something where the email comes in not from them, and you're like, okay, is this valid? Do I really want to click on the link? Especially with another ransomware attack going on out there. All right, so I can get those links and embed them in my email. One of the even neater things is beyond making files available to you, I can request files. All right, so if I need to get something from somebody, I can send them a link. They click on the link and they're taken to an upload page where they can then upload that file to me. All right, so I can make it easier for users as well, and we actually have what we call request list. So if in what you do when you bring on a new customer, you have to if you have to get a bunch of information from a new customer, instead of trying to explain all the stuff that you need, you can actually just provide them a list with links to the different information so they can just upload those various different pieces of information that you need. And we do a lot of integration on the Microsoft side. So Aaron had mentioned about Office 365 integration. One of those pieces, whether you're using Office 365 or not, is our Outlook plugin. Okay, so if you have access to a ShareFile account, you can just add this plugin to Outlook, and right from Outlook, you can either send or request files. So when I go and say I want to attach a file, it's going to say, well, where do you want to attach it from? And again, all of those things I've connected through ShareFile are available to me. Okay, you can see from there I can also request those files. We'll come back to the initiate approval a little bit later. All right, but when I create those files, whether I'm requesting or attaching files, I've got a lot of information around it. So I can keep track of whether or not people are accessing those files, get a notification. I can require them to provide a name and an email address. All right, so I'm sure you've seen the attachments from people now that says that this email was attended to the initial recipient. If you're not them, delete the email. Okay, well, that's basically kind of saying, hey, we're trying to make sure the right person is getting the information, and that's one of the things we can do with the name and email, because now we actually have somebody. Yes, we can't really guarantee it's that person, all right, but we have somebody who's saying, yes, I'm validating that I am the attendant recipient before I get this file, all right? We can actually have them sign in. So we can create guest accounts in ShareFile for our external customers. And the good thing is those guest accounts don't count, okay, to my number of users. All right, so if I work with lots of external customers, it doesn't, I don't have to pay for ShareFile accounts for them. I just set them up as guest users on my account, and then we can set up a username and password for them. Or I could just make the access anonymous, so maybe it's basic information that I want to make available, you know, a flyer about an upcoming product or something like that. I can make that available to anyone. I can determine how long that link is going to be available, okay, and what can users do with it. All right, we'll talk, you know, right now it says full control, so basically they get a live copy of the document, so let's say it's a Word document, they could edit it or whatever. All right, and I can limit how many times they can download it as well. We also now have a new plugin for Outlook and Gmail, okay, that provides us the same kind of functionality, but even with Outlook Online, okay, and Outlook for Mac, as well as Gmail. Okay, so if I'm not using the full Outlook client, okay, so maybe I'm connecting into my Office 365 account from my home system, and I don't need my full Outlook client, I still have access to easily making those files available to the recipients of my email. I can also, by setting up a guest account for a user, provide them access to a specific folder. All right, so if you have external customers that you collaborate with very often, very easy to set them up with a guest account, and then, you know, share a specific folder with them. So anything that they need, they can get from that folder. Anything they need to provide, they can just upload to that folder, and they're going to have access to that information for you. Now, one of the other things, and this is a neat little tie-in with Office 365, is if I have an Office 365 account, I have access to Office web apps. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what that means is I can log into my ShareFile from my browser, go in and look at a document and say, oh, wait, I got to make this update. Well, what do I need to do? Oh, okay, well, I need to download it. No, you don't. Okay, when you're looking at the preview of that document, you just click Edit. If you haven't already set up the link, it'll ask for your Office 365 credentials, and then you can actually edit that document directly right in your browser using the web apps. And I can actually have other people accessing that document and editing it at the same time. Okay, so if somebody else, including external users, okay, log in and they've got Office 365 accounts, which gives them access to those web apps, we could co-edit a document instead of trying to bounce, you know, an email back and forth with an attachment. And like Aaron talked about, you know, we usually get lost in, okay, what version are we on? Right. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. When we looked at that Outlook plugin, there was that about how control the user had. With that, we're talking about information rights management. So really what we're doing is we're doing things at the file level. So when we talk about data security, there are a lot of different places and a lot of different ways that we're gonna secure that data. All right. So from a user standpoint, how many times do they have access? What kind of credentials do they need? In terms of devices, if I've got a device and I've got the ShareFile app on it, I can remotely wipe that data. And then on the content side, we're talking about products like data loss prevention solutions. Okay, stepping back to the documents themselves, so really where we talk around information rights management. And really what are we talking about? Okay, so if I have a document in ShareFile and I send you an email with an attachment link, And so you click on that link and you download that file. I no longer have control of it. It's out of my hands. Well, that's where information rights management comes in, because now instead of that recipient forwarding on to somebody else and them having access to it, I can actually block access. So they have access, they can open it up, they may be able to edit it, they may be able to print it, but if they send it on to somebody else, they won't have the appropriate credentials to be able to open that document. All right, so we do that by partnering with a third-party provider, okay, that handles that information rights management. And the whole idea is to get that control over those documents once they've left our direct control. Okay, so once they're out of my cloud storage or wherever I have my data, all right, we now have a way to continue that control. And so again, if I send that out to somebody and a few months later something happens with the relationship, I can at that point say, you no longer have access to this document, and they're not going to be able to do anything with it. All right, one of the last things I want to talk about is document workflows. Okay, we all have approval chains. We all have the situations where this person creates it, it has to go to somebody else for a review, somebody has to approve it before we can send it out to a customer. And then in a lot of cases, we need to get feedback from that customer and have some action items on that as well. So one of the things that we can do with ShareFile is we can create approval workflows. So basically what we do is we create our document, and then we're going to create a approval workflow. So basically I did say, okay, this is the document we're working with, this is when I have to have everything done with, I add my approvers, and then I can actually say, do I just need them to have looked at it because the system can track whether or not they actually opened the document, or do you need them to actively sign off and say, yes, they approve it? And with this workflow, I get a lot of very detailed information. All right, so I know whether or not people have looked at it, whether they've made changes, and as I have those revisions available, so I see what changes have happened over time. And then kind of the last piece of the process is the fact that I can do an electronic signature. Okay, we all have paperwork that we really, we need to do. I'm sure you've been into those situations where you're trying to find a FedEx drop-off location because you've got a signed document that you've got to get to somebody by tomorrow. Okay, well, how can we solve some of those problems? Another Citrix product called Right Signature is available as part of a ShareFile subscription, and it allows you to do electronic signatures. So what you can do is on that document, you can create text fields where people have to fill in information. You can create checkboxes. It's very common when we talk about electronic signatures that you're going to have some kind of disclosure which basically says, I agree that by providing electronic signature, it's as valid as a physical signature, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Again, from regulatory standpoints, we're going to have situations where we still need those physical signatures, but this can make the process significantly easier. So now once I've defined what I want in terms of my signature, I can send that document out, and the recipient is going to get that. They're going to see this is what we need you to do. They're going to be able to open up and review that document and then provide their electronic signature. It's going to automatically provide the date. And if you see off to the right, we've got a detail about what happened with that document. So we're actually going to see whether or not, when the approval was started, when things were actually sent out, who opened it. Okay, so we know that the intended person opened it, and we've actually recorded the IP address of the system that they opened it from. All right, because, hey, this is the internet. We can tell where people are doing stuff from. Okay, so we actually have that validity that it was the intended recipient, or if it was not, that, we'd have some way to validate that or not. So the whole point of using solutions like this is that ultimately we're trying to make security better. okay, and make the experience better. And like I said, people are going to need these tools. They want to use these tools. They're going to find ways to use them. So the best way to deal with it is to make them available. All right. So we're going to have more control over that data. If it's sitting in somebody's inbox, so it's sitting on their hard drive, okay, we don't really have control over it. All right. If it's sitting in a shared location and I can monitor and manage and audit what people do with it, I've got control. All right, going to help us with compliance regulations, okay? Compliance, hopefully you have not run into problems, but a lot of times it isn't actually, have you had a problem or have you had a breach? It's, are you taking adequate control? Okay, there are documented cases out there where, you know, things happened and people were fine, not because any data got out, but because they determined there weren't adequate precautions, okay? So even if nothing happened, you still can get fined from a compliance standpoint. All right, and your intellectual property, your information is the most important information you've got. You know, do what you can to keep control over it. All right, and provide that great experience. Okay, you know, how many of your users, you know, Dropbox accounts are actually tied to their personal email? Okay, or, you know, how many times have you used personal email to send something because it was too big to go through company email? How professional does that look? All right, by using ShareFile, we can create an experience. It's going to be, you know, logoed for you. It's going to match your look and feel. Okay, and, you know, so your customers are going to be confident that when they go out to get that file or to upload that file, that it's actually going to you, and it's not something that, you know, somebody's trying to get that information or download some malicious information. So ultimately, we want to empower users to do the jobs that they're trying to do. Okay, Aaron touched on it. The vast majority of security and compliance problems out there are not malicious. Okay, it was somebody did something to try to make their job easier. Okay, or they're looking for a better way to do things. All right, so instead of trying to block it, which we're not going to be successful at, let's enable those people to do things in a way that we can control, monitor, and manage. We've all run into those problems with versions, okay? You know, I personally have been on calls where you know, somebody goes off on something, and, you know, somewhere in the call, somebody's like, Joe, we took care of that 2 revisions ago. What version are you looking at? All right, we've all run into those kind of situations. Let's solve those problems before they even happen. So I'm going to go through a couple examples. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of application for just about any kind of organization that you can think of. But I want to go into a couple of good examples. Accounting is very, very big on ShareFile. Simply because the kind of information they're sending, very personal information, social security numbers. You know, do you really want, you know, the profit numbers and the cash flow numbers for your business out there in the wild? All right, so they recognize how secure this stuff needs to be. That is very, very sensitive information, and again, they want that professional look and feel. From a compliance standpoint, healthcare is always number one, simply because we understand the fines that are involved. In a lot of other cases, you know, you don't have those hard dollar amounts where we do in the healthcare industry. So there's a lot of things we can do, making it easier for people to work, making the data securely available instead of them trying to figure out a way to get it to somewhere else because they want to work on a different device. All right. And then another one that you may not have thought of, and that's on the construction side, where you've got things like blueprints and drawings that are very often quite large. The other thing is when you go out to the ShareFile website, you have preview capabilities of those documents, okay? And that's not just Word documents or PowerPoints. All right, I've honestly been amazed at the kind of stuff that you can preview. So you can actually bring up a CAD drawing, rotate it, move it around, and have a lot of the the control that you'd have and capabilities without having to install any real application. So it's very easy, especially if you're working with external customers, for them to be able to review stuff in detail without actually need access to the underlying applications. Needless to say, a lot of people are using this. When people have experience with it, they'll happily use this over other solutions. There's a lot more we can go into about some of the integrations and where this all fits, but I really wanted to give you a kind of a broad overview, get you thinking about things, and then see what you've got in terms of questions for me or for Aaron about how we can help you with these solutions.
Okay, Andrew, we definitely had a couple of questions come up during your presentation. If you don't mind, I'm going to try unmuting Kristen. She had a couple of questions on usability. Oop. All right, I cannot unmute Kristen, so my apologies. She was asking, is the document locked, or does it show that it's locked or that someone's editing it while two people are looking at the same document?
It really depends on how you're doing it. So what I talked about from the collaboration standpoint, you're both actively editing it, and there will be an indicator that somebody else is in the same document. Now, if you're both accessing it on your own personal machines, not doing it through the web app in that kind of collaborative mode, then it's going to be just as if that file was on a file share somewhere. So yes, you would have the potential that you might both be editing the same thing at the same time and potentially could have a conflict. Okay. One of the things that ShareFile is very good about is they integrate with a lot of other solutions. So if that's a common issue, obviously there might be other ways to look at what are you doing with that file. There may be a better way to capture that information, but there are also other document solutions that can integrate with ShareFile to get the benefits, but handle that only one person has access to it. And that tends to be very common a lot of times in like legal and those kind of things, where they've got to really keep track about who has touched what when.
Oh, okay, great. And I don't know if you can see Tanya's question here. It says, how does an implementation work from an existing Dropbox account if we were to look at moving from that to Citrix? Need to establish all new admin, employee access, etc.
So if you're coming from a Dropbox for business, so all your users have associated accounts back to the organization, then yeah, in that case you would probably want to move the data out of Dropbox for Business, and then it's really a case of do you want to do it via connectors and migrate it as people are using, and then at some point close off access to Dropbox for Business. Or whether you wanted to coordinate something and try to do that in a shorter time period, okay, and get all the data moved over. As for the access accounts and those kind of things, again, it's one of those, there is not a tool that's going to say, okay, well, let me just grab all of the Dropbox for Business accounts and replicate all that stuff over here on the ShareFile side. But one of the things I always encourage when people are making any of those kind of transitions is always take a look at what you're doing, and because a lot of times policies and things get set initially, and then over time they kind of drift from where they were, and a lot of times you need to take a look at where you're at now. So yeah, so if you were moving from something like a Dropbox for Business, yeah, you'd probably want to look at, okay, what all data do we need to move over? Do we want to do it kind of as a gradual or a full transition and get everything moved over?
And would that be any different with Dropbox Pro? She was saying that they're all single accounts that have been established over time. So I would assume it's like many migrations or connections that would be established.
Well, in that case, that's typically, with Dropbox Pro, that's really just a personal subscription. And so in that case, typically what we'd encourage is we'd set up the new kind of managed environment under ShareFile and then provide users with one-way connectors. All right. So they could move stuff into ShareFile from their Dropbox subscriptions. All right, and that's kind of the way we look at it, because in that case, you really want to get the data out of that Dropbox environment. But its kind of thing is, well, if you've got a Dropbox account, you've probably got a lot of other stuff in there too, because it's pretty darn handy to have. And so, it's very difficult to say, move everything over, because you potentially could have personal information, because honestly, it's a consumer personal account. And so using that connector to Dropbox, but making it one way to encourage people to move stuff into the now managed system is probably the best way to do it.
Okay, great. And also, RMON can definitely help with that. She was also asking if we would help. Of course, that's our job, is to help, set up the migration process and the new business account of ShareFile, because it's really going to be the new way that you're managing all your data, but having a similar experience to your personal Dropboxes. So that would be a huge improvement, I think, to go to that solution. And let's see, looks like we have another question here. It looks like there are a lot of options out there with ShareFile. How do I figure out what I need?
And you just answered that one yourself, Erin, and that's talk to RMON. There are a lot of choices. There are different features at different licensing levels. A lot of different ways we can implement. You've got choices about where you want to put the storage. And one thing is always saying, I kind of mentioned it in that transition conversation, but one thing that we find when people start looking at these solutions, if they don't have anything in place, they don't have a document retention policy. They don't have actual guidelines for their users about how do you deal with company data. So what we generally encourage is, that's a great time to sit down, design that out, make those decisions, and in a lot of cases, that's going to drive your design. That's going to drive the choices that you make to fit that policy that you're now putting in place. Beyond that, a lot of it is looking at what you've got and where you want to go, and deciding sometimes what do you leave behind. One of the things that comes up very often is hey, we've got all this stuff. Maybe we've got a NAS box or a couple of file servers. We've got all this old data. Do we have to put all that stuff up in the cloud? The answer is you need to decide. All right. Some of the information you want to keep and you want to make available going forward. Some of it you just maybe want to look at it from more of an archives kind of situation, where if somebody really needs it, you could get it, but it isn't necessarily immediately available as part of your solution, especially if you're talking about large amounts of data and you're looking at cloud storage, where you're going to be paying by capacity as much as anything.
Now, talking about paying for capacity, et cetera, Kristen, I want to make sure, Kristen, do you have any other questions? And did we cover the question you were answering earlier? If you want to let me know in the chat box, I don't want to leave you hanging on anything. But she's also asking about a price range. And personally, I don't know. The sales team handles that. But Andrew, you had hinted earlier that it's a pricing by user. And I was under the assumption that it was unlimited storage as well. So maybe you can touch on how the pricing works, and then we can reach out to Kristen after the fact to discuss it further.
The answer is there are multiple options. I'm an engineer, so I don't know pricing either. But there's actually a couple of different ways to do it. So generically, you are going to be paying for users. All right, so that's the first thing. So if you've got 50 users, it's going to be X per user, and obviously with more users, at some point the price per user goes down. Then the other question is where you can put your storage, because you could just buy user licenses, use on-premises storage or your own cloud storage, and then you're not paying for storage whatsoever. You can also buy storage on the Citrix Cloud, on the Citrix ShareFile Cloud, in which case you're going to pay for that capacity. Yes, there are licensing levels that provide unlimited storage, okay, on the Citrix ShareFile Cloud, but that is going to have a higher per user cost. Okay, it's also going to come with a lot more features, which you may need or you may not need, depending on what you're looking to do. So again, how you're going to use it, what capabilities you need do you need, and that's really going to drive what ultimately your price per user and capacity are really going to be.
Okay, great. So what I'll do, Kirsten, I'm sorry, I've been calling you Kristen the whole time, my apologies, but I'm going to have Chris reach out to you after the fact to go over the different levels of service for Citrix ShareFile, because I do know through my training that there are different package options for you to choose from, and he can let you know the pricing from there. We do have one more question up here on the screen. If I don't have any existing file servers, how would ShareFile benefit me?
Well, the answer is if you don't have a way that you're managing your users' data already, they're managing it themselves. So you're into that category of shadow IT because your users are using this stuff. You know, you've got way too much storage on your email server because everything is attachments to email. Okay, you've got the problems with versions where people don't necessarily have the same version. All right, so ultimately, you know, you have the need for this. People are using their own solutions. You just have no idea what's going on in terms of what they're using, where that data is, who has access to it. So like I said, this is a great opportunity to really put a policy in place, give people the stuff that they're looking for in a way that you can get some control over it. All right, because like I said, the stuff is out there, and if nothing else, even if you could convince me that you have absolutely no reason to collaborate whatsoever, I'm going to challenge you that if you've got mobile users, you have lost data, either because they've lost devices or because devices have failed. All right, and so if I've got users out there with laptops that are running the ShareFile Sync client, I can back up all that critical information, all the stuff in my documents or whatever I choose to back up, back to ShareFile, whether it's cloud or on-premises storage, and provide some level of availability. Because this kind of thing is, I will tell you, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else, people do not back up their laptops. They're not good about making sure that, you know, they've got things protected, and those kind of things. So you have the need for it, and like I said, even if you aren't interested in the collaborative standpoint, from a user backup kind of thing, it's not a bad way to approach it. And I can absolutely guarantee you, once you have access to some of these tools, you're going to find new and different ways to use them. And you're going to quickly get to not imagining how you could have lived without them.
Yeah, I agree with finding the new tools. We use it in-house, and I have all my marketing materials approved by the owners through the function where you share and get the feedback workflows, I believe, and it's just simplified the entire process of getting approvals, and I can't imagine living without it. You're right. So anyways, this has been a great webinar and lots of helpful information. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Does anyone have any further questions before we start wrapping up the call? If anyone wants to start a free trial, definitely drop me a line, call us here. Anyone can help you here at RMON. Request a cloud consultation or sign up for our newsletter, or your employees up for our newsletter, because we talk about challenges of shadow IT, new products such as Citrix ShareFile, webinars that we have. So we really try to keep them educational focused to make sure you're up to date on all the information you need. So if anyone wants to take advantage of any of these things you see up on the screen, definitely give me a shout and we'll take care of you here. All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome very much.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.